In 1992, the 1 millionth computer had just connected to the internet.
And there were less than 50 web servers on Earth. In May of that year, a document was written with an idea for a piece of software so sophisticated, it almost seemed impossible.
Ben Natan and I were the first two developers on SMS. We'd spent a year going around talking to corporate customers. So we came back from that and we met Hans Witt, and we were introduced to a fantastic project.
The important thing to know about Ben Natan was he was a part-time opera singer, and he practiced in the bathrooms at full volume.
And barefoot.
Hans and two other guys had written this vision document for a possible project.
The idea was to collect software inventory and hardware inventory from PCs and distributing software to those PCs, all from a UI that's managed centrally.
It was completely unique, incredibly exciting, and wonderfully difficult. The business justification for the project was to do something fantastic for our customers, and also something that would make Windows absolutely unique.
That document literally established a new industry.
Back in May of 1992, I was a senior at University of Washington looking to go to grad school in the fall. I saw an ad in Seattle Times looking for an intern from Microsoft working on this project, and I applied for it. After I finished my intern interview, they sent me this vision doc that described what the project was. And we started writing code in June of '92. The entire dev team was me and two other guys.
Even today, there are comments in the code from 1992 that were written by Ken, the intern.
No one ever called me that.
I called him that.
The first thing we wrote was a UI prototype that's written in Visual Basic.
After the UI prototype was done, we shopped it around to customers. They were very excited. Going to customers early like this with a new product was completely new.
One of the earliest technical decisions which we made was to write SMS in C++ instead of C.
The complex technical reason for why we chose C++ is simple. We really wanted to get good at C++.
The server side of SMS was designed for Windows NT, but Windows NT at the time wasn't stable enough, so we wrote our first few lines of code on OS2.
It even ran on network file servers that Brad was surprised to hear when he learned a couple weeks ago.
How could I have not known that?
Our customers had machines all over the world they wanted to manage, so our first big challenge was geo-distribution. The extreme case of this is we have a customer who wanted to send software updates to submarines using their normal communications channel and piggybacking on top of that.
Yeah, submarines.
I wonder who that customer was.
Even today, we refer to the usage pattern of servers that are disconnected for long periods of time as a submarine case.
Early on, there was a decision to support lots of different platforms: DOS, Windows, OS2, Windows NT, as well as DEC Alpha, NetWare, and Apple.
And herein lay problem number 2.
Half of these machines couldn't even talk to each other. So how are we going to manage all of them?
The key to making it work was an architecture that was ridiculously low-tech.
I mean ridiculously low-tech, even for the time.
The architecture copied files from one place to another to control what components did. An elegant side effect of this was that the components were strongly decoupled.
When I first learned about the file copying approach, I thought it was, well, primitive. Everyone at the time was pushing distributed object systems like Corb and DCOM, so it really didn't seem to make sense.
The benefit of this was that the architecture was easy to upgrade and easy to add to.
And it was easy to trace the system flows. Using tools like SMS Trace made our logging system very popular with support engineers and with the customers.
As I looked at the SMS architecture, one of the things that just jumped out to me was how robust the architecture was. This is really a complex area that we're tackling.
And I bet it seemed like those guys had a ton of experience with C++.
The genius of this architecture is what has allowed us to innovate on top of it for 25 years.
Right away, from the first day, we had way too much to do. So we brought in partners from outside to write pieces, even fundamental pieces like our admin UI.
The earliest codename was Hermes, but no one on the team now remembers why we called it that.
I think Hermes was the Greek god of software distribution.
And that began a series of interesting code names: Opal, Topaz, Emerald, because they were all supposed to be gems, and then Panamax, Firefly, Delmonico.
So we were building SMS with a Gateway 4666 with 500 meg hard drive and 32 megs of RAM. In the lab, we had this machine that we called Big Gig, where everybody stored all their files on it. It was called that because we had a 1 gig hard drive and was the biggest in the lab.
Our first set of build machines followed a certain naming convention. There was Enmity, Hatred, Armageddon, Death, Apocalypse.
It seems like everybody was pretty glass half empty back then.
It got a little dark a few times.
But then we had another builder, he was more a glass half full guy, and he named the machines after Little Mermaid. And even today, our main build machine's still called Mermaid.
Early on, I was hired as a tester to find bugs.
We found the first real bug in September of 1992.
I remember one of the first bugs I found was a VGA bug. We still had a lot of VGA cards around back then. It was related to a setup icon that wouldn't render right. Everyone told me to go find this guy named Ken and have him debug it.
I don't remember that VGA bug at all.
I remember when he was debugging it, looking at his monitor and thinking, no wonder he didn't find this. He had this awesome monitor that I would give anything to have.
I do remember that monitor, 40 pounds, $1,600, and it's a beauty.
Our very first build was build number 245. Why not 1? Windows NT was at build number 300, and we didn't want to seem too far behind. But if we were the same as them or too high, it might look suspicious. So 245 was the number.
When I joined, I thought as soon as possible I was going to get out of here and join some team that was more famous like Windows.
The first time SMS was mentioned in public was at a Win32 conference in July of 1992.
So people knew it was coming and had an idea of what it was going to be capable of doing.
The very first release of SMS 1.0 was November 7th, 1994.
When SMS 1.0 was released, I was working at Novell and I was actually on the front lines of support, providing technical support for all the Novell products. You know, for me, I was using Windows for Workgroups 3.11.
By then, we lived in a completely different world compared to when the code was first written in 1992. The newest version of Windows was amazing, the phones were unbelievable, and Microsoft's very first website was awesome.
SMS was very unique and ahead of its time. I mean, think about it. Back in the early 1990s, many of us were just getting our first experiences with PCs. And here Microsoft is coming out with a global solution to manage PCs at scale. It's crazy.
When SMS 1.0 first shipped, Bill Gates sent an email to the entire company.
Bill G's mail included telling people how to unenroll from SMS if they didn't want it on their machines. What it didn't tell them was the secret registry key that kept it from getting installed at all. And it made sense not to mention it since such a key never existed.
The first thing I heard about SMS when I joined was that Bill Gates could not talk about SMS without using colorful language.
The first time I saw SMS, I was a support engineer supporting NT and OS2 and LAN Manager. I went to a product fair and I saw a demonstration of remote control. Remote control looked to me like magic. I thought to myself, I want to support that product.
The first time I ran into SMS, I got out of school as a developer and I went to work for a customer and they introduced me a product called System Management Server 1.0. They just wanted me to rip some code out so that they could use parts of it in their own enterprise. So we went ahead and worked on that, worked a couple nights, reversed engineered the DLL, and then we had great remote control in our enterprise without SMS.
Unacceptable!
So when I joined the team in 1994, we were supporting 3 different platforms. We had x86, Alpha, and MIPS. The build machine to build Alpha was the size of a small refrigerator. So it used to take over 18 hours to build the build scripts on a MIPS machine. And if we got close to a deadline, I used to have to stay up late at night and babysit the build scripts to make sure they didn't stop. Otherwise, we'd miss our deadline. I also built into the build scripts the ability for it to page me. Of course, when it did, I couldn't dial in or use terminal server because that didn't exist yet. I used to have to drive into the office and fix it manually.
Things were a bit fragile then. I remember one SMS fix rendering our Windows NT MIPS machine unbootable.
Not long after SMS 1.0 shipped, Microsoft bought a UK company called Network Managers.
There were 20 of us that came to Microsoft as part of that acquisition back in 1995. We didn't have the word acquihire back then, but that's what it was.
Back then, when we acquired a company, HR would go out and visit and show everyone a video of people water skiing on Lake Sammamish before work.
She was launching from a private dock, it was sunny, it was awesome, we were totally sold. Literally no one checked what the climate was like in the Pacific Northwest before signing our acceptance letters.
We called it the British Invasion.
I'm Irish.
Is Mick gonna be pissed about that? He's totally gonna think I still don't remember.
We ended up not using much of the IP for reasons. And I'd like to think we made a big difference.
The UK team made a big difference in terms of the time and intensity of Friday happy hours.
I initially didn't want to work at Microsoft. I kind of interviewed on a dare. But when I showed up, there were these guys with British accents and a guy with an Irish accent, and I kept thinking in my head, this is like being in a Monty Python skit. I thought, okay, maybe I'll stick around because something funny is gonna happen. When I joined the team right after they had shipped 2.0, every day I'd walk into the kitchen and there was always this free pile of swag and free food. And I thought, oh, this is a pretty nice perk. Pretty soon, however, I just learned that there were so many engineers out on the road all the time that they were just bringing back all this free swag from customers.
I refer to this pile as a food experiment, and my hypothesis proved correct. Hungry engineers will literally eat anything. Nothing will stop them if it's free.
When SMS 2.0 shipped, I was one of the guys on the team that flew around to customers to help them get it set up.
Sometimes We were less there to help them set up, and we were more there just to help them dig out of a hole.
2.0 had a few functionality issues at the beginning.
A couple of months after SMS 2.0 released, I was sitting in the audience of a technical briefing when the guy on stage said, "Hey, we have somebody from SMS here we'd like to bring up." So when they found out I was from support, a lot of customers immediately started yelling at me about how long they had cases open and how long they had been waiting for hot fixes.
At that time, there was an average of 900 support cases at any given time, and it took us 100 days to produce a hot fix.
A lot of the work that I was doing was to help customers get SMS off their client machines because we were bringing their network and servers down.
I remember going on site to a major airline, and many of their flights were delayed due to SMS 2.0 bandwidth issues. I had to put my best customer voice on to keep them calm.
When we finally got it right with SMS 2.0 SP2, we had to begin the apology tour.
It was pretty rough.
Yes, it was hard.
To this day, I try to fly that airline to make up for all their pain.
You know, at this time, I was leading the competitive efforts at Novell around ZenWorks. ZenWorks was #2 in market share to the leader, SMS. You know, I used to spend days and weeks on the road visiting customers trying to convince them to come from SMS to ZenWorks.
We shipped SMS 2.0 late, but it was still 6 months too soon.
Honestly, it was a low point for the team.
When I first showed up, there was a Microsoft project printout on the wall. It was 90 feet long, went all the way down the hallway. I thought, well, this team really knows how to plan. A month later, I realized we're already a year late.
In some ways, we focused on the wrong things. We spent a lot of time and resources innovating in Windows NT and Active Directory, but in many ways, we missed out on the quality.
I hadn't fully realized how significant the issues had been with SMS 2.0 until I joined the team in 2003.
In some ways, we had basic laws of physics working against us. It's really hard to do distributed systems on so many platforms when your team is really small.
We worked in shifts around the clock for the next 6 months, shipping Service Pack 1 and Service Pack 2 for SMS 2.0.
The most requested feature for SP1 was faster uninstall because it impacted the domain controller.
I'm the first to admit that SMS 2 on SP1 were a bit of a mess, but it gave me the opportunity to work much closer with people in support. One guy in particular was the unlucky person who got to track all of the CLI token account lockout cases, and I worked with him constantly.
Since I was one of the tech leads for SMS 2.0, I worked with the product team on many issues we were tracking, and there was a lot to talk about. As part of the SMS bug investigations, I was looking through a lot of source code, and I noticed one of the developers was making a lot of smart-ass comments in his code. When I went to one of the ship parties, while half the dev team was jumping in the fountain, I finally met this smart-ass developer.
He talks a big game now.
And now we've been married for 14 years.
So yeah, not a great product, but I got a husband out of it.
Yeah, some of the product team members worked really close with support.
I like to say the product group had to pay for the sins of SMS 2.0, and the sacrifice had to be me or Ken Pan, and Hans is very glad it was me.
When SP2 went out, SMS was finally at a quality level we could be proud of.
But when you hear about it now, those 6 months nearly killed everyone.
There was an understanding that we could never let this happen again. That's when we hit the road.
We learned so much in those visits that it really changed the way that we shipped SMS after that.
We were really the first team that deeply interacted with the customers and built what they needed.
The thing about Ken's philosophy of deeper interaction, that meant he went on site and he took the code and he would just compile fixes on the spot. So later, I'd get a call from customers and they would ask, are you gonna document this setup switch? And I'd never heard of the switch, and I would look in the code and it's not in the code.
Because Ken had basically built them a private version of SMS.
Ken got a lot of grief for that.
Ken had a saying, if it got coded, it got shipped.
What a lot of people forget was that SMS 2.0 was a revolutionary product. We standardized manageability in the industry, driving the DMTF, driving manageability in Windows with WMI. And it was this perfect collision for a perfect product and a set of customers who were desperate for it because this was all in early 1999, right at the cusp of Y2K.
The support teams were staffing around the clock just in case the world ended. January 1st, I had a midnight to 3 a.m. shift, but nobody called, so we played cards.
One of the really great things that came out from this was the level of customer connection and customer empathy that the SMS team just had as a core part of its culture. I think this has been one of the core reasons why SMS and SCCM has been so incredibly successful over the years, is that focus on customers and that customer empathy.
Back then, our term for being on the road we called it 911 visits because pretty much everything was an emergency. After the 911 visits, we realized we needed a way to talk to customers and to deploy the software to really understand what customers needed.
We called that our TAP program, and we were one of the first groups at Microsoft to do anything like that. I've been in a lot of groups since then, and no one at Microsoft has really matched what we did in SMS or what we do today.
We really sat back and looked at what that experience was and learned there were two significant things that we implemented. First, we put in place the world's best TAP programs. And we had these incredible programs where we would literally help customers get deployed. In fact, we would actually send an engineer and a program manager on site for those initial deployments. We wanted to be right there, hand in hand when the deployments happened. Then the second thing that we did is we got really, really close with our own IT department. And in fact, we actually did something that was unheard of in the industry at the time, which was I actually gave our own IT department the veto authority over shipping the product, meaning if they didn't think it hit the quality level, they could actually veto the shipping decision.
It was actually great to have an environment as demanding as Microsoft. Think about it. You have thousands of Windows engineers deploying new builds of Windows every day. And they notice if their boot or logon times increase or if their CPU is spiking during the day. But by working with the Windows teams early on, our expertise with Windows went through the roof.
It was during those XP Springboard days that I learned about the rubber hose attack during threat modeling from Bruce.
This was also the time of NIMDA and Slammer. Microsoft was ready to highlight its security practices and totally pivoted to do a security push. We worked internally with Microsoft's security development lifecycle team and with external security companies, and we got really good at it.
I was really involved in our early TAP programs, and I can tell you we were fanatical, learning what it took to build and ship enterprise software.
What Bill Gates liked about SMS was that we looked into customer adoption, and we also were able to iteratively redesign SMS based on customer feedback.
Over the years, as we've really progressed on these TAP programs, we've literally spent time with thousands of customers. And it's been amazing to see how that learning just feeds right into the team and we implement it every day into the things that we build.
The MMS, after we shipped SMS 2003, there was a buzz everywhere. Brady Richardson and I were kind of joking a little bit about it, and he said, you know what? We should ship a product that works more often. And then the funniest part was that I made Brady say it on stage to all of our attendees.
Yep.
That MMS in 2003 was incredible because we were showing customers for the first time the bug volumes, our find, fix rates, and the thousands of machines that we tested on.
The idea was to actually show our attendees the science behind shipping a quality product.
100% of our efforts were focused on really building that trust with customers. We needed them to understand exactly what we were doing, why we were doing it, and how that was going to benefit them.
I was backstage during the process, and the problem with the AD integration is it only worked 40% of the time. And if it failed, you had to reset the domain controller. So I was backstage checking the beta code in between slides. However, I couldn't move the mouse without the audience noticing. Oh man, luckily that worked. I don't need that kind of stress again.
I'll tell you, it was an intense time.
One day, two guys in suits show up and they bring this laptop and they put it down on Mick's desk and they say, "This is Bill Gates' laptop. It takes 10 minutes to boot up. Fix it."
Yeah.
A really, really big moment in SMS history was a thing called the Wall of Fire that we did in 2004. We were at the IT Forum conference and we wanted to show off the OS deployment capabilities of SMS.
We came up with this idea on how you could use SMS 2003 to upgrade multiple machines from Windows 2000 to Windows XP SP2.
And hey, why don't we do this in front of a live audience?
It would be this whole wall of PCs being upgraded all at the same time.
Oh yeah, and it's cool enough, we should put it in Bill Gates' keynote.
Yeah, it turned out to be a lot of work.
A bunch of work. It was an unbelievable amount of time we had to spend to get it right.
We called this wall of PCs behind the stage the Wall of Fire.
For the purposes of the demo, I had to whip together some code that we could actually use to unimage machines and get them back to the state that they were in before so we could rerun the demo over and over again.
On the 15th try, it worked perfectly.
It ended up working really well during the keynote.
I'd like to ask Bill Anderson to come up again, and he's going to show you a demo here, which I consider one of the neatest demos ever done of any management-related software.
If you guys will take a look to the right-hand side of the auditorium up toward the front, you're actually going to see a curtain that's pulling back away. But enough about that. I want to light the wall on fire. So say a prayer to the demo gods, because there's no backup for this one, and I'm going to execute this script.
And we had the challenge to be able to do this automatically was laid down several years ago, so it's fun to be here and see it actually working with shipping products.
I still have a picture of Bill as he was watching that wall of fire get re-imaged. He's got this big grin on his face and it's like this look of achievement. And it was just a very, very proud moment for us.
But what's even more impressive is Brett was the junior developer on this project, and his boss got stuck in customs with an expired passport, so he had to take care of everything by himself.
Brett was a lifesaver that day.
We were so relieved.
We were so exhausted.
We worked hard, but we also had a lot of fun, sometimes at each other's expense. I remember one time when someone hid a device in the ceiling of my office, and so would whisper, "Can you hear me?" every 30 minutes, and I couldn't find it.
The ceiling speaker? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I knew who hid it, although he never admitted it to me.
Yeah, I put it there.
Our director of engineering, David, always wears shorts, even on the coldest day of winter. And so anytime he's actually wearing long pants, we know that something's actually going on. So I remember this one meeting where we were meeting with an executive at Microsoft, and David showed up wearing pants. Doyle stood up and said, "Dave, I've never seen you in pants before." The look on the executive's face was priceless.
We developed quite a vocabulary for incoming problems and their solutions. In the early days of laptops, there was a problem before we shipped where any machine with SMS could be compromised if it was attached to public Wi-Fi. We called that the Starbucks attack.
Let's see, there was also Sideshow Bob, the Corendi,
the Honey Bucket, and the submarine case.
We also had the rubber hose attack, which was really bad.
I think my fondest memory on working on this team and this product for as long as I did was sitting in a review with Jim Alchin. We were going over our ConfigMan 2007 plans, and he stopped us all before we started. He says, "I just want everybody in this room to know that where you guys have brought this product to is an amazing place compared to what was. And for all of you who are actually here through the bad times, I consider you heroes."
It was about this time I remember sitting in it was a night meeting with a bunch of senior leaders, including Bill and Steve. And at the end of the night, the question was asked, hey, what were the most significant things that have happened in the last 12 months at Microsoft? And I'll never forget, Bill said, "We got SMS and Active Directory right." That was just an incredibly proud moment for all of us who had worked on SMS. To hear the individual, Bill, whom we all admired and was leading the company, single out the work and saying this was one of the things that impacted Microsoft more than anything else in the previous 12 months. That was one of the most proud moments of my professional career.
In 2005, everyone started talking about rebranding all of the system management tools with a single name. So in 2007, SMS was rebranded as System Center Configuration Manager, and it came with support for Windows Vista and for Windows Server 2008. That was a lot of words, so everyone just called it SCCM. For more than a couple reasons, that acronym didn't work, and marketing wasn't a fan of it either. So eventually everyone landed on calling it Config Manager.
So the first thing I remember was SMS was some kind of server product at Microsoft, and I had no idea anything beyond that.
When I joined SMS in 2008, fresh out of college, I had no idea what it did.
When I joined SMS, I had no idea that it had nothing to do with text messaging.
On my first day, they were walking me through the OSD wizards, so I was like, okay, I click a few buttons and then 100,000 machines reformat. Those wizards are too powerful for me. When I came on campus to interview, David James came up to me, he was like, "I have the perfect opportunity for you. I want you to be the judge of a fashion show." And I was like, fashion show?
To be clear, there was a business justification for this. It was part of an internal program we called Dev Survivor, and the winner got an all-expense-paid trip to MMS to meet all our customers.
So I go down there and they're all dressed in these different fashion outfits and they're supposed to be like inspired by SCCM. It was quite a spectacle.
You'd be surprised how competitive people get to win one more week of work.
So in 2008, the team had to make a pretty big decision about the architecture of Config Manager so that it could scale more effectively.
This meant moving to a CAS-based architecture, but making the leap was very risky. Over the years, we made a lot of huge bets, but maybe one of the biggest was moving from our old hierarchy model to a more simplified hierarchy model.
We knew our scale had to improve dramatically. At the time, we were maxed out at around 150,000 clients. The beta was bad.
That beta, it was rough.
I remember sitting in Ken's office with David thinking, can we afford to rip all this out and start over?
It was clear as we had to rip it out and we had to move the architecture.
There was a lot of consternation in the team about the change, so I decided to burn the ships and delete the old code so there was no retreat. We had to make it work.
We spent the first 2 years trying to incorporate a lot of external technologies and tie it all together and make it work. But ultimately, we ended up writing our own thing in about 3 months. And then we spent a year working out the bugs.
It was a crazy amount of work, but we pulled it off, and the next release was great.
One of the reasons why I think SMS has just remained relevant for so many years in the industry and in the lives of IT professionals is the willingness and the capability for the team to push forward always refreshing and pushing the architecture forward to deliver what was needed, given what was happening in the industry.
At one point, there was some disagreement between the leadership team and the feature team about whether to use our solution exclusively. They had some concerns about whether our solution could scale. So like any good feature team, we went rogue. We set up a skunkworks type lab, swore the perf team to silence, and went to work implementing our own solution.
I think most of those changes made it into the final build.
All of our changes made it in.
There were definitely a few broken things scattered along the way.
Definitely some traumatic mishaps now and then.
Anyone who builds software can tell you that when software breaks, it really breaks.
There were some real disasters.
We've always deployed our releases internally first before asking top customers to do it.
There was a good reason for those problematic internal deployments, though. The goal was for us to get it right here first so that we were the ones experiencing the problems and not our customers.
And yes, one time in 2003, the Wi-Fi went down for the entire Microsoft campus.
I remember hearing about the time we accidentally DDoS attacked ourselves.
Well, stuff happens.
Oh man, that was so brutal. One of the two big features in SMS 2003 was Active Directory integration.
There was one morning in ship room where we couldn't triage bugs because the network was down in our building.
I remember sitting there thinking, man, why can't IT just keep the network up for once?
At the time, we didn't think anything of it.
Turns out there was a bug in our code. Every machine at Microsoft was pinging the domain controllers every 5 minutes.
Yeah, it wasn't just our building.
Turns out every building in Redmond was down.
Yeah, that was definitely our fault.
I got an email from MSIT with a dollar figure for the estimated loss of productivity for the company. It was awesome.
We prioritized finding and fixing bugs, and there were some big ones over the years.
A couple of those bugs lasted a really long time.
The longest tenured bug we had ever was number 777, and it was actually a feature request, not a bug.
That bug was filed in 1995. It's basically the maintenance window feature we have today.
Bug 777 was mentioned in every single release until we finally shipped a fix for it.
We finally got around to fixing that in 2007. Of course, we fixed 137,000 other things before then.
We actually threw a party for that bug. Looking back, it's interesting how many technologies started with SMS and then outgrew us. Bloodhound became Netmon, WebM became WMI and went into the OS. Even the OMA DM stack that we built went into Windows and became foundational for Intune.
When I got out of college, I had a choice between working for Microsoft or a cell phone company. At the time, I knew everyone was going to have a cell phone someday, but everyone was also going to have a PC. So they both had a lot of potential. The funny thing is, today, PCs and phones are so close that we manage both of them.
I loved the initial internship so much, I decided to skip grad school and stay on the SMS team until I eventually run all up engineering for ConfigMgr. I worked on SMS team for 20 years until I moved to lead the Intune engineering team.
I wouldn't have expected to be here 20 years later, but you grow to love the team and the product and the customers and what the customers are doing with it, and you just stick around.
I came to work at SMS during the summer while I was in grad school. I realized on my first day in the office that the challenges here were way more interesting, that the people here were brilliant, they were tenacious, and I was going to learn much more working at Microsoft than I was going to learn back at school. And that was 17 years ago.
Even though when I came, I was going to leave as soon as possible, I have not looked around still. I never have. It's because of the customers, the team, and the challenges.
Almost my entire career at Microsoft has been with this product, this team, and our customers. I have loved it since I first saw SMS 1.0 at a product fair.
One of the things that I think has really separated the SCCM team from others in the industry is the longevity of the team and the leaders. You know, there are people who have been on the team for 10 years, for 20 years. As I look at this leadership team, without a doubt, there is more experience and more time building products for the enterprise to manage endpoints than any other team on the planet.
I think one of the things that people don't realize is the cost of ConfigMgr's success is the continuity of the people that work in the team. My first manager from when I joined 16 years ago is still with the product. My first mentor is still here too.
ConfigMan has taken up most of the adult lives of the engineering leadership team, and that kind of longevity, that's amazing.
You know, I often sit in these meetings and I look around at our new hires and I think to myself, man, they're younger than some of the original code that was written on SMS.
The project started a year and a half before I was born.
2.5 years before I was born, coding began on SMS.
Je suis née en juillet 1991, 10 mois avant que le produit soit codé.
I was born the very same month that the first lines of code were written.
I was 1.5 years old when the project started.
I was 4 months old when they started writing the code.
One of the biggest differences between SMS 1.0 And where we're at today with Config Manager is the release cadence. I can still remember my first day when I joined the SMS team back in 2003. You know, we had an all hands meeting and I got up and told a little bit about myself. And the first question that came in as we got to a Q&A section was, hey, what do you think the biggest thing we need to do or change in SMS is? And I still remember my answer was speed. We got to get functionality out faster. We have to actually work how the system works so it actually behaves faster. And now look where we've come.
We changed our release cadence from every 3 years to 4 months for production and once every month for tech preview customers.
That was an impossible thing to think about in 2012, not to mention back in 1994. And now it seems crazy to do it any other way.
Deployments and update have become so streamlined and so simple that it's almost anticlimactic now. It's over in a matter of hours and not weeks.
The deployment time is the other thing that greatly improved. It used to take months to deploy a new version of SMS, and now we could do it in a couple of hours.
Recently, the SCCM team was on a customer call on standby as they were deploying on a Friday evening to the entire hierarchy. The time came and went. We hadn't heard anything from the customer. We were all really getting nervous. And then we got a call that said that they had deployed their entire hierarchy before the end of Friday evening. And that's it. A weekend's worth of work done before dinner on Friday.
There are 1,000 of those stores.
Thousands.
You know, I can remember when we first started telling customers that we were going to move SCCM to a monthly release cadence. And you know, the initial shock, like how can we ever consume that fast? Now we take a look at where we're at with current branch, and it's amazing as you watch the release cadence and how fast customers are now adopting it.
There's more interest in Config Manager today than ever in its history.
And I love what we're doing. We take everything we've learned over 25 years of building SCCM and working with customers around the globe, and that now all feeds right into Intune. And in fact, if you take a look at Intune, it's just the next evolution of the architecture of SCCM.
ConfigMan has been relevant for so long because of how it pushes itself forward. And now the cloud is just the next evolution of an architecture that has never stopped evolving.
That's why it's been such an important and impactful tool in our industry.
But we've only told you half the story.
And we want to hear from you. Please submit your stories. We're excited to hear about them and publish them for others to hear as well.
Tell us what it's been like to spend your days with it.
Or maybe the first time you used it.
We'll take your stories and we'll put them together and create V2 of this video, which we're calling People's History of SCCM.
You can upload your video with your story here, or you can find the camera crew near the Microsoft booth at Ignite.
We build Config Manager for you, and we want to hear your story.